There is a kind of deceit that doesn't explode into a relationship like a sudden storm. It doesn't arrive with a dramatic confession in the middle of the night, and it rarely reveals itself through an obvious mistake. Instead, it seeps in slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, like poison mixed with honey. At first, everything still looks normal on the surface. The words are still affectionate, the gestures still appear loving, the man standing in front of you still says, "I love you." Nothing seems dramatically wrong. There is no shocking discovery, no message accidentally revealed, no clear moment where the truth suddenly becomes undeniable. But something underneath the surface begins to change. A subtle shift in energy, a distance that cannot easily be explained. Maybe it's the way his attention drifts when you speak, as though your words no longer fully reach him. Maybe it's the way his responses become shorter, less present, as if part of his mind is somewhere else entirely. The conversations that once flowed naturally now feel slightly forced, slightly disconnected. And while his voice speaks one truth, his eyes seem to be searching for something somewhere else. This is the nature of hidden betrayal. Because when a man is living two emotional lives at the same time, when he is feeding two relationships with the same heart, the same attention, the same promises, he does not behave like a criminal trying to hide a crime. He behaves like a performer protecting a role. His lies are not clumsy, they are not chaotic, they are carefully crafted, measured, delivered with just the right amount of calmness and confidence. Because what he is protecting is not just a secret relationship, he is protecting an identity that allows him to remain the loving partner in your eyes, while privately indulging desires that contradict everything he claims to stand for. To the world and to you, he must still appear loyal, dependable, and committed. Maintaining that image becomes just as important to him as maintaining the secret itself. And the lies he tells are never random. They follow patterns, they are rehearsed, strategically placed inside moments where your trust is strongest. They are built on the foundation of your love, sculpted around your hopes, and reinforced every single time you ignore the quiet voice inside you that whispers that something doesn't feel right. At first, that voice was very faint. It appears as a small feeling of discomfort, a moment where something in his behavior doesn't fully match the person you thought you knew. Maybe he becomes slightly more protective of his phone. Maybe his routine changes in ways that seem minor but unusual. Maybe there are moments when he seems emotionally distant, even though nothing obvious has happened. Individually, each of these signs may seem harmless, but together they form a pattern. And patterns tell stories that words often try to hide. This conversation is not about creating paranoia. It is not about assuming the worst in every situation. It is about recognizing patterns, because betrayal rarely reveals itself through one dramatic moment. Instead, it leaves psychological fingerprints, small signals, repeated phrases, behavioral shifts that when viewed together reveal a story very different from the one you were being told. The tragedy is that many people ignore these signals for far too long, not because they are foolish, but because they want to believe in the relationship they have built. They want to believe that the person they love is the same person standing in front of them now. But deception survives in silence. It survives in doubt, and it grows stronger every time intuition is dismissed. That is why learning to recognize these patterns matters so deeply, because sometimes the difference between years of confusion and a moment of clarity is simply the willingness to trust what you feel when something begins to change. And sometimes, learning to recognize these patterns early can save you from years of confusion, self-doubt, and emotional damage. Because the truth does more than set you free. The truth protects you from being manipulated. It protects your peace, your dignity, and your sense of reality. And sometimes, all it takes to reclaim your clarity is learning to recognize the lie when it appears.
One of the most common phrases used to hide emotional betrayal is deceptively simple. She's just a friend. On the surface, it sounds harmless, almost ordinary. In fact, it's such a common statement that many people dismiss it without a second thought. In modern relationships, having friends of the opposite gender is considered normal, even healthy. So when a man casually describes another woman as just a friend, it rarely raises immediate suspicion. But beneath its simplicity lies a powerful psychological shield, a phrase that has been used countless times to minimize suspicion, to dismiss intuition, and to quietly protect relationships that exist in the shadows. Because when a man says she's just a friend, he is not merely offering information. He is shaping a narrative designed to neutralize your instincts before they have the chance to fully awaken. The moment those words are spoken, something inside you pauses. Your intuition, which only seconds earlier was trying to raise a quiet alarm, suddenly becomes uncertain. You hesitate. You question yourself. And instead of trusting the subtle discomfort you feel, you begin rewriting your interpretation of the situation. You tell yourself you might be overthinking. You remind yourself that mature relationships require trust. You convince yourself that questioning him might make you look insecure, jealous, or controlling. And that hesitation, that moment of self-doubt, is exactly what makes this phrase so effective. Because the real power of this lie is not in the words themselves. It is in how those words manipulate your desire to appear understanding, to appear mature, to appear like the kind of partner who trusts without suspicion. But when "she's just a friend" becomes a repeated explanation for behavior that feels increasingly strange, the pattern begins to reveal itself. Suddenly, you notice things you didn't notice before. The way he subtly guards his phone when her name appears on the screen, the way his mood shifts when he receives her messages, the way he seems unusually energized around her, yet strangely distant around you. Maybe he laughs a little louder at her jokes. Maybe he brings her name into conversation more often than seems necessary. Or maybe he becomes strangely defensive whenever her name is mentioned. And when you gently bring it up, when you try to express the small uneasiness that has been growing inside you, the reaction you receive is rarely calm reassurance. Instead, it's often irritation, an eye roll, a sigh, a disappointed look. Why are you being like this? You know you can trust me. But what you've actually done in that moment is threaten his narrative. And that narrative only survives if you remain silent. Because once questions begin to surface, once behavior patterns are examined instead of ignored, the illusion starts to weaken. And that is why the phrase returns again and again. "She's just a friend." It becomes his reset button, his defense mechanism, a quick way to redirect the focus away from his behavior and back toward your supposed lack of trust. If he repeats it with enough confidence, he hopes you will begin doubting your own perception. He hopes you will feel embarrassed for even asking. He hopes your loyalty will become the blindfold that prevents you from seeing the truth clearly. And tragically, many women accept that blindfold willingly. Not because they are naive, not because they are incapable of seeing the signs, but because they love deeply, because they want to believe that the man they chose would never deliberately betray them, because their understanding of commitment often includes giving the benefit of the doubt, even when doubt is the only thing left. And that is what makes this lie so powerful. It does not force you to ignore the truth. It simply encourages you to doubt yourself long enough for the truth to remain hidden.
But real friendship does not require secrecy. It does not thrive in hidden messages, late-night conversations, or emotional withdrawal from the person you claim to love. Real friendship exists in the open. It integrates naturally into a relationship without creating tension, confusion, or emotional instability. It does not require secretive behavior or careful explanations every time its presence is questioned. Instead, it exists comfortably within the boundaries of honesty and transparency. When a friendship is genuine, there is nothing to hide. There is no reason for guarded phones, nervous reactions, or defensive explanations. So when the phrase, "she's just a friend," becomes a repeated justification for secrecy, emotional distance, and defensive reactions, something deeper begins to reveal itself. At that point, it stops being about her, and it starts revealing something about him. Because if she truly were just a friend, there would be nothing to hide. There would be no tension surrounding her name, no discomfort when she appears in conversation, no sudden changes in behavior when her messages arrive. Everything would remain consistent, natural, and transparent. But when secrecy enters the equation, the meaning of that phrase quietly begins to change. It becomes less of an explanation and more of a shield, a simple sentence used to prevent deeper questions from being asked. And often, when those questions begin to surface anyway, another phrase quickly follows, a phrase that is even more subtle and far more psychologically damaging. "You're imagining things." At first glance, these words seem harmless. They don't sound aggressive. They don't sound cruel. In fact, they are often delivered with calm confidence, almost like reassurance meant to calm your concerns. But beneath that calm tone lies one of the most powerful manipulation tactics in human relationships. Because when someone repeatedly tells you that what you're seeing, feeling, and sensing is not real, they are not simply disagreeing with you. They are slowly rewriting your perception of reality. This is known as gaslighting, and its effects can be deeply destabilizing. Gaslighting doesn't begin with obvious lies. It begins subtly, almost quietly. It starts with small observations. You notice his mood changes when certain messages appear. You sense a distance in the way he interacts with you. His routines start shifting in ways that don't feel natural. Maybe he suddenly becomes protective of his phone. Maybe he steps outside to take certain calls. Maybe he smiles at messages but quickly locks the screen when you walk into the room. These are small things. Individually, they may not seem like proof of anything, but your intuition recognizes patterns long before your mind does. Your instincts begin connecting the dots even when your rational mind is still searching for explanations. So you bring it up carefully. You're not accusing, you're not attacking, you're simply expressing a feeling. You mention that something feels different, that something feels slightly off. And that's when the response arrives. You're overthinking. You're imagining things. You always jump to conclusions. In that moment, your emotional signal is dismissed, not as a valid concern, but as evidence of your supposed irrationality. The focus quietly shifts. Suddenly, the issue is no longer his behavior. The issue becomes your perception. Instead of examining the changes in his actions, the conversation turns to whether your feelings are valid at all. And once that shift happens, the dynamic of the relationship changes dramatically. Now, every time you feel something is wrong, you hesitate before speaking. You question your own instincts. You begin wondering if your intuition is flawed. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for evidence that maybe you misunderstood something, maybe you overreacted, maybe you misread the situation. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you start losing trust in yourself. That is the true power of gaslighting. It doesn't just hide the truth, it disconnects you from your own ability to recognize it. It replaces clarity with confusion. And once that confusion takes hold, it becomes much easier for the person hiding the truth to continue doing so. Because when you doubt your own instincts, you stop asking the questions that might reveal what's really happening. But a person who truly loves you does not need to distort your perception to protect themselves. They don't make you feel crazy for noticing patterns. They don't punish you for expressing concern. They meet your honesty with honesty. They listen when something feels wrong. They reassure you through transparency, not through dismissal. Because real love does not thrive in manipulation. It thrives in clarity, in openness,
in mutual respect. And any relationship that requires you to silence your instincts, question your reality, or doubt your own emotional intelligence in order to keep the peace is not built on truth. And without truth, no relationship can truly survive. Because love grows stronger in the light, but deception always depends on the dark.